Hi, I'm Malika Bilal, and you're in the stream. Today, China is facing growing international pressure to stop oppressing its Uyghur population. But some surprising voices are speaking up to defend the government's policies and their Muslim ones. Tweet us your thoughts or leave them in our live YouTube chat. There are some 11 million Uyghurs in China. They are an ethnic, mostly Muslim minority who have lived in the northwest Xinjiang province for centuries. In recent years, China has stepped up its repression of the group. Survivors recount torture and forced indoctrination at internment camps. Uyghurs also experience constant government surveillance and restrictions on religious practice, rights groups say. In July, 22 countries sent a letter to the United Nations condemning the camps. 37 other nations quickly responded with a counter letter defending China's human rights record, including more than a dozen Muslim-majority countries. So what's going on here? Have Muslim countries abandoned the Uyghurs? Well, joining us to discuss from Toronto is Farida Deef, Canada Director of Human Rights Watch. Farida specializes in matters concerning countries who are part of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, or OIC. Rushan Abbas is here in studio with me. She is the director of the Campaign for Uyghurs. And next to her, Azim Ibrahim, Director for Global Policy in Washington, D.C. Welcome all of you to the stream. I want to start with a clip because it seems American officials have been some of the loudest voices when it comes to condemning China's abuse of Uyghurs over the past few months. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo recently called their treatment the stain of the century. Take a look.
And in China, the Chinese Communist Party demands control over the lives of the Chinese people and their souls. China is home to one of the worst human rights crises of our time. It is truly the stain of the century. Since April 2017, the Chinese government has detained more than 1 million Chinese Muslims and other minorities in camps in Xinjiang.
So, Azim, why haven't Muslim-majority countries been more outspoken when it comes to this issue?
That's a very interesting question. The reality is that China is a rising power, a rising superpower. Its rise is happening a lot faster than anybody anticipated. And I think this is just a taste of things to come. China is not willing to allow countries to be bystanders. They have to be fully on board with its oppression. And many of these Muslim countries are indebted to China. China, through its Belt and Road Initiative, has organised a mechanism which they call debt book diplomacy, and these countries are in huge debt to China, and they are looking to China for investment, for trade, and so on. And China, if it wants these countries to participate, wants to be fully on board with its programme, including those against the Uyghurs.
Farida, what was so interesting about what Azim just said there, I had to write it down, not allowing them to be bystanders, and I think that's exactly sums it up very well. Tell us what we know about who these countries are, specifically these Muslim-majority countries.
Yeah, so, I mean, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation is really meant to be the collective voice of Muslim governments around the world. It has, as part of its mandate, the core objective is to safeguard the rights of Muslim minorities everywhere. And so one would think that the Organization of Islamic Cooperation and its members, 57 members around the world, would be outraged by the scale and severity of abuses against Muslims in Xinjiang, China. But what we've seen again and again, both at a meeting of its foreign ministers in Abu Dhabi in March, as well as more recently at the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva in June, is not only silence, on the part of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation and its members, but in fact, you've seen countries go out of their way to applaud China's treatment of its Uyghurs. They did this in a resolution at their Council of Foreign Ministers meeting in Abu Dhabi. They said they praised China's treatment of its Muslim minority, and they called for greater cooperation between the OIC and China. And then most recently in June at the Human Rights Council in Geneva, they again applauded China's treatment and said that its actions in Xinjiang were leading to a greater sense of happiness, fulfillment, and security for the people of that region.
And I want to share what that looked like that you mentioned there, that letter. This from Kevin Pinner, who says on Twitter, here's the letter supporting China's policies in Xinjiang. Highlights, we appreciate China's commitment to openness and transparency. Since approximately when the camps began, people in Xinjiang enjoy a stronger sense of happiness, fundamental, and security, end quote, Uyghurs. And you can see it there. It's tagged there, and we will retweet that out. Our community is not surprised. Rushan, we got this from someone who says the Muslim majority country should be at the forefront of condemning China's cultural genocide against its Muslim community. Their silence is a scar on the conscience of Muslims and all those who believe in fundamental human rights. So people online not so surprised. Are you?
I'm not surprised either. I'm just disappointed because China is using economic advantage over those countries. Most of those countries are in debt to China because of China's heavy infrastructure investments, those countries, and the debt trap diplomacy, Belt and Road Initiative power. So I'm not surprised, but the Muslim countries, we expect them to not to pick economy or China's power over the Muslim brothers and sisters' faith. Islamic hadith on brotherhood says all Muslims are al-ummah as one body, and if one part gets sick, the whole body is supposed to react. Right now, the entire Uyghur Muslims are being amputated from this body. So I hope we are not alone. I don't blame the governments because of their influences by the Chinese influences over those countries. But the people, I think, if only they knew what is happening to Uyghur Muslims, they will be with us and they will be outraged.
And of course, you speak to this from a personal stance because you have family members who are there. You've been on the stream before and you've recounted what some of your family members have been through. And I know that's a difficult one for you to share. But our audience finds it important, and they find it important because they feel like no one is talking about this. Not enough people are talking about this. When's the last time you heard from your family in Xinjiang?
Well, my sister is abducted 6 days after I was outspoken about the conditions of the camps at the Hudson Institute, one of the think tanks here. That was the last time my family heard about her, from her. It's almost a year now. I have no idea where she is. I don't even know at this point if she is still alive. I'm just one example of millions of Uyghurs. My husband's entire family, over 30 members of his family. Last time he spoke to his family was April 2017. So this is what the Uyghur community abroad facing these days.
I want to share with our audience what some countries are doing about this. Particularly, one example is Malaysia, because some are saying that this is a tightrope that they are walking. Now, Malaysia is one of the Muslim majority countries that stayed silent about China in July. So here's Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad explaining why when asked by TRT World's Imran Garda.
China is a very powerful nation, and the way we treat America is also the way we have to treat China, because it is powerful, it is capable of taking action on its own that may be detrimental to the relationship of many Muslim countries with China.
So the Muslim countries have to be careful about condemning China?
We do what we can. We don't knock our heads against a stone wall simply because it is there. We can condemn it, but the fact is that the condemnation alone is not going to achieve anything, simply because China is a big power, and there is no question of us taking any violent action against China.
Sure. Azim, he says, we do what we can. What do you make of that?
Well, at the moment, none of the countries are actually doing anything, and this is the great irony, is that is only the United States has actually overtly spoken out. And you can understand why. The United States is a superpower. China is unable to bully the United States in the manner it can bully other countries. China is a very vengeful nation. You know, any country that speaks out, they'll threaten them with pulling out investment, pulling out students, pulling out all sorts of goodies that they've given them. So countries are completely unwilling to speak out. One thing we need to understand is that President Xi himself is under immense pressure at the moment. He is now seen in China as having lost America during the trade war. war. He's now also seen as having almost lost Hong Kong. And so he's under immense pressure himself. So I think we can only see the situation with the Uyghurs getting much worse, simply because he cannot afford to lose any further control over the situation on the ground.
I want to share a comment from our audience, an audience member named Mohammed Osman, who explains from his view from Pakistan why some countries, including his own, are not talking about this. Have a listen.
Hi, my name is Usman, and I believe that China's investment in Pakistan, that is the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, more commonly known as the CPEC project, established back in 2015, and it currently represents 20% of the Pakistan economy. I think it's a very important project for both the countries, especially Pakistan, considering the fact that it has a big influence on the Pakistan's economy.
So Farida, if those figures are accurate, 20% of the economy, one might understand why they're hesitant to speak out.
Yeah, I mean, certainly there are a number of countries that are beholden to China, and the Chinese government does buy silence through its investments, whether through the Belt and Road Initiative, the large infrastructure project, or through other kinds of investments. But what was particularly surprising is there were several members of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, wealthy countries like Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Qatar, and others that, you know, similarly were silent. They don't rely on Chinese investments. They're not beholden to China in the same way as poorer countries, but they themselves also lined up to, you know, to applaud China for its treatment. And what we saw was Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia in February go to China and actually applaud the Chinese government's de-extremism efforts in Xinjiang. He is, you know, as you know, the custodian of the two holy mosques in Mecca and Medina, and he himself applauded China's treatment. And so another rationale for, I think, you know, some of the other countries in remaining silent is they equally have very abusive counterterrorism policies and strategies in their countries. The Chinese government is, you know, using counterterrorism as an excuse for its repression in Xinjiang. The entire campaign that's been put in place is called the Strike Hard campaign against violent extremism. In fact, that bears no resemblance to the reality on the ground whatsoever, but it's a very useful foil to use to, in a way, to be able to justify its repression of 13 million Muslims in Xinjiang, the detention of over 1 million Muslims arbitrarily without any legal process, to be able to label it falsely as terrorism. And unfortunately, many governments, including wealthy governments that aren't beholden to China, are very quick to turn a blind eye because they themselves have very abysmal counterterrorism policies in their countries.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very important point. You know, one of the questions we need to ask is why is China actually doing this? And there's multiple reasons. You know, they have an ideology of Sinification and so on. But a key reason I believe is that you have to look at what the motivation of China is. And China's number one fear, I believe, is not that there's going to be a trade war with the US or the US might invade. The number one fear the regime in China has is that the economy will slow down and there will be a popular uprising against the regime. So what they are doing in Xinjiang is essentially a very large test laboratory. They are essentially creating a highly technological, sophisticated surveillance state in which they can master how to control a large population using the latest technology, surveillance, mind control techniques and so on. And once they have perfected this, they have already started rolling this out to the rest of the country, and they are also starting to export some of this technology and know-how to other countries like Venezuela and the Philippines. So this is not just confined to Xinjiang. We need to understand that we will see a lot more of this technology used to control massive populations, and we'll see this around the world. And many of these regimes that Farida mentioned are interested in this. You know, this is the reality, right, is that they are interested in how do you control massive populations with all these kinds of techniques. So we will see a lot more of this, not just in Xinjiang, but essentially spreading throughout the globe.
And Rushan, I wonder how much of Greater China knows that what Azim just laid out there is happening, because we got this comment from someone watching live on YouTube. Amani says, I studied in China, and a good friend and classmate is a Uyghur. One day he cried in my dorm and told me how they took his father away. I didn't know how bad it was until I left China. So do you think that there's an awareness, a greater awareness of the Sinification of China or of the oppression of rights of minority groups in China?
I don't believe so. Because of the information blockade within China, people don't know what is happening. Just like they are trying to tell the world that this is not the truth. They are not the concentration camps. They are the re-education vocational training centers. They are using propaganda to fool the Chinese population as well. Even the people in our region, in Uyghur region, from township to township, from this area to, from city to city, they don't know what is happening. The Islamic countries also, like I mentioned earlier, if the people only know what is happening, the world population, also this is information era. We are not getting enough media coverages on this. So people really don't know the scale of it. This is the atrocity of the century, but still not being covered in mainstream medias, even in United States.
I want to share with our audience a comment, because of course we reached out to several Chinese officials for comment for today's show, but they have not responded. Now, in July, a Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson defended the nation's policies in Xinjiang, and here's what he said.
On the issue of Xinjiang, the Chinese government and the Chinese people have the most say, and it accepts no interference by any foreign state or external forces. In the face of severe threats posed by terrorism and extremism, the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region has adopted a series of measures of anti-terrorism, including the establishment of vocational training and an education center to reverse the security situation in Xinjiang. There have been no violent incidents for more than 2 years in Xinjiang, where we can see social stability and national unity and the people living and working in peace. The happiness, sense of acquisition, and sense of security of the people of all ethnic groups have substantially improved, and they sincerely support the government's policies.
So keeping that in mind, that justification there, I wanted to share this tweet from Arsalan Hidayat, who wrote in, similar to what you said earlier, Farida. He says, Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince, MBS, told reporters in February, China has the right to take anti-terrorism and de-extremism measures to safeguard national security. If Saudi Arabia and Pakistan are unwilling to condemn or even affirm Beijing's cruel mistreatment of Muslims, he writes, then who will? Talk to us, Farida, about your thoughts upon hearing that comment from the Chinese Foreign Ministry and the context behind what countries feel like they can talk about when they have dirty laundry, so to speak, in their own backyard.
Yeah, I mean, I think, what we've seen from the Chinese government, from, spokesperson after spokesperson, really is a complete whitewashing of its record in Xinjiang. The Chinese authorities even lead kind of state-managed, highly controlled visits to Xinjiang by diplomats in order to really just show them this sort of glowing picture of what's happening in the country, which, any reasonable person would know is a complete sham. But I think, it's surprising in a way, just the level in which the Chinese government is portraying its campaign in Xinjiang as a model of de-extremism, de-radicalization, and it is so incredibly dangerous because if this model is exported elsewhere, one could see other countries in which sort of massive human rights abuses take place, and the irony of it as well is that when you see Muslim majority countries completely ignoring this situation. The hypocrisy is so clear here. If 1 million Muslims were arbitrarily detained without any legal process in Sri Lanka, in India, in the United States, there would be a public outcry by Muslim majority countries. In China, you have a situation in which 1 million Han Chinese are being placed in the homes of Uyghurs to document every aspect of their lives, to document their religious practice. If that happened, if 1 million non-Muslims were placed in the homes of Muslims in any other country in the world, there would be outrage. But what we see is that time and again, countries, including influential and wealthy countries, that are Muslim majority countries, are willing to completely ignore the abuses by the Chinese authority and in fact praise China, which really threatens the rights of Muslim majorities everywhere in the world.
It's a point well made, and it's a point also made via a video comment we got from a community member, Sama Hadid. She's a human rights campaigner based in Beirut, and here's what she told the stream.
Muslim majority countries like Turkey, Indonesia, Pakistan, and the Gulf states, among others, have remained completely silent when it comes to the issues of the Uyghurs. This comes as China increases its investment in these countries, and it seems as though these economic deals and trade has brought the silence of these Muslim majority countries. As the issue of the Uyghurs becomes far more well known and the repression that they've faced is far more publicized, we'll see growing backlash against not only China's treatment of the Uyghurs in its territory, but also the complete silence of its governmental allies in the Muslim world.
So she mentions a growing backlash. Azim, I'll direct that to you because we got this tweet from someone who's not so sure. Simata says the so-called Muslim majority countries are either fighting amongst themselves or are divided on the Uyghur Muslims' oppression, giving the impression that they are scared of China. Maybe the OIC can do something about it. Now, we reached out here at the stream, and Al Jazeera reached out to the OIC to join us for this program. They didn't respond. What do you think the fear is? Because there is the idea that all of the OIC countries, nations combined, should have enough leverage to confront China.
Yeah. No, one would think that. The reality is that all diplomacy is done behind doors, so I'm not sure what the OIC may be doing behind doors, so I can't necessarily comment on that. But this, the way I see the situation, I think it's just going to get worse and worse. China is rising so fast, and these countries, like one of your previous callers spoke about the debt and the friendship between Pakistan and China and so on. And I think this is a very salient point because I wrote an article on this, and the backlash from Pakistani Muslims was quite severe. It was actually quite surprising, even to me. And this idea that China is a benevolence friend to these countries that is investing in infrastructure and so on, it's just patently false. China has no benevolence motivations at all. They are getting these countries into massive amounts of debt that they will not be able to service. And Sri Lanka was a model of this. They are engaged in economic colonization. A country like Pakistan is in debt to China over $62 billion, with interest that's going to be over $90 billion. Can Pakistan, with a completely dysfunctional economy, ever service that debt? They certainly cannot. China will simply move in, as they did in Sri Lanka with President Rajapaksa, and start taking over national assets to renegotiate that debt, including the Gwadar port and others. This is what we are going to see is economic colonization, debt book diplomacy. And in that situation, do you expect these countries then to stand up to China? Absolutely not. So this is just a taste of things to come. And these countries, because of their poor mismanagement, have put themselves into this situation.
Rushan?
Well, China is a communist country, so those the Muslim majority countries and the Islamic organizations should realize the atheist communist ideology, they don't tolerate any kind of religious beliefs, and they look at Islam as a threat to the communist regime. So today, the OIC or any other Muslim countries, they are not realizing what's happening in our region, what's happening to Uyghur people are not going to stay there. Everything is going to be exported, like what Asim said. It's going to be, the Chinese Communist government is calling Islam as a mental disease, sinifying Islam. They are removing all the halal signs in Beijing. I wonder what the OIC members are going to go and eat in which restaurant in Beijing if there's a meeting. Because what's happening to Uyghur people, number one, it's because of the Belt and Road Initiative puts our area, our region is the epicenter of the Belt and Road Initiative. Number two is our religion.
Right. Rushan, I have to pause you there. I take your point. I think our community would agree. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us, Farida Deef, Rushan Abbas, and Azim Ibrahim, and of course to our community for joining us as well. We'll see you online.